All right, welcome back to another weekly series on Wizard Trails. This week we're going to not necessarily be stress testing a component of a format or a card of the format, which is the normal process. But with Grand Prix Oklahoma City this weekend I'm flying to, and Grand Prix Portland next weekend in my backyard, it's time to go and narrow down, play the known quantity decks, and really decide where to end up, if any of them feel right, or if I really need to find a hidden gem to look into based off some of the information I've gotten from previously testing. So we're really going to look at a review. This is going to kind of act as a review of Mythic Championship 7, what I think about the decks and the format, and how I think that tournament went, as well as what I think that means for the Grand Prix coming forward, because with the new digital era of Magic, with Arena and Moto and Twitter and all these sites, the format shifts very quickly. So what we had finished yesterday might not be valid anymore as of tomorrow. So we're going to start with the championship deck. Peter, if you aren't following him on Twitter or watching his streams, especially in Modern, but in basically every format, he's what I would consider one of the top, if not the best players in the game currently. He consistently has strong decks, best builds, and he plays incredibly tight to very strong outs. So he played Jund Sacrifice, and this was one of the decks I tested about a week or two ago on stream, and I think it's really strong. I think it's a deck that I would want to consider running. It just has a ton of interaction, ton of synergy, and the combination of Cauldron Familiar plus Witch's Oven plus Mayhem Devil give you inevitability that a lot of decks don't have. Trail of Crumbs and Corval give you a lot of card advantage, and then it just does a bunch of solid interaction. Every card in the deck is advancing you in some way, shape, or form, even when you're interacting with your opponents. So your Beanstalk Shine is an eventual threat. Your Masker Girl is a sweeper that is also a threat. So the deck is just really strong. Playing it some online, he beat Brad Nelson in the finals against Blue Green Flash. Brad would have had to win 2 matches. He only had to win 1, and he won in 3 on the first series. But I have found that matchup is not the easiest matchup. You do have some difficulty in resolving your threats and making sure they stick and they matter. So I think it's something that's worth testing. And I don't think there's a deck in the format. It's best to go and acknowledge it now that there's not a deck in the format that just single-handedly dominates everything. So you're going to have to play tightly, play smartly, and have a little bit of luck in your favor, like with most tournaments. You just got to set yourself up to take advantage of the luck when it matters and not lose when luck isn't a factor. This is on my short list of decks to consider playing. I think Casualties of War just is so. In Thrashing Brontodon, we have 6 main deck cards that are really good against Fires and Invention decks. And then it outgrinds the straight green-black cat decks through Mayhem Devil and Corvold. So it's definitely a deck that I think is strong. It's a little unfortunate not to see Midnight Reaper in the deck, but that's because it has other cards that matter more. That being said, I think Jeskai Fires is on the downtick, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, which means that maybe we can shave Casualties of War. I was testing some last time with 3 Casualties and 3 Corvold. Maybe Thrashing Brontodon can be Midnight Reaper or more Murderous Riders, just more flexible cards. But I think the deck overall is just incredibly sound. Second place in the tournament, another deck worth considering, but I think is going to get heavily attacked, and it's a deck that traditionally I would love to play, but I'll explain why I'm hesitant in a minute. It's Brad Nelson, Seth Manfield's Blue-Green Flash deck. Brad Nelson played incredibly well, was able to battle back from an earlier loss in the top 8, and because it's a double elimination. And the deck is incredibly strong. Main deck Aether Gusts and Mystical Disputes are kind of crazy. And I think the deck is really got a lot of pressure, especially on these Corvold cat decks where you can counter certain pieces. I think their inevitability makes this match a little hard, but Sorcerer Spyglass out of the sideboard helps a lot. The reason I'm more hesitant to play this deck is, as much as I think Teferi Time Raveler is going down in strength and popularity, I'm really hesitant to play cards with instant and flash, and it lives off of that axis when there is a card like Teferi Hero of Dominaria or Teferi Time Raveler floating around the format, because it can just blank what you're doing. So I'm testing the deck some, and it's one that I might play, but I have to feel really confident that it is the clear best deck in order to really want to run this one. Third deck, and one that I'm pretty close to ruling out, is Jeskai Fires. This one was played by a number of players. It was one of the most popular decks in this Paulo Vitor-Amorosa's list, PVD, and I think it's a strong deck. I think it's really good, but I think the format is really aggressive to it because it's such a known quantity, and it's not hard to be aggressive to it. Casualties of War is just such a strong card already. Thrashing Bronzedom is really good against aggressive decks, so it's a strong card already. And if you don't resolve fires, it's really tough. And then in the blue-green flash matchup, they can just counter all of your relevant spells as you're casting them, because Fires of Invention keeps you from playing your own counter magic to protect. So you kind of leave yourself exposed to have this combo play. The only strength within that matchup is you do have Teferi Time Raveler. So if you can stick a Teferi Time Raveler against Blue-Green Flash, then this deck becomes notably better. And Fires of Invention does make it difficult for Blue-Green Flash in the sense that I can cast 2 spells in a turn, and they have to make the right choice on what to counter. So I think the deck has still got a ton of legs. I think it's a deck that's still worth testing and playing. I think I'm ruling it out for my testing moving forward, but I wouldn't fault anybody for continuing to try to tune and play this deck. But right now, I'm leaning towards Blue-Green Flash and Rakdos or Jund Sacrifice being 2 of the top decks out of these 3. The fourth deck, run by Menguchi, the Scarf himself, I really love this deck, and it is just blue-green ramp. So instead of having all this instant speed and flash, part of the reason I like it is you're not susceptible to Teferi. You generate a ton of mana, and it makes me kind of interested to play this deck. You get quasi-duplicate Risen Reefs or Cavalier of Thorns. You have this Finale of Devastation and Raise Forerunners for the combo finishes, and then you just make Nissas and Hydroid Crises and Cavalier of Thorns, which the Cavalier of Thorns itself makes it really hard for the cat decks to grind you out, and you're making big bodies so they're not attacking you. So I think this deck is in the hunt for me. If we can find a way to realistically add white to it without taking a lot of hits to our core deck, being able to shave some of our more greedy cards, maybe our Agent of Treachery or Enraged Forerunners, our 2 quasi-duplicates for 4 Teferis, makes me really want to play this deck even more, because if I can stick it, if I can go Grazer on turn 1 into a turn 2 Teferi Time Raveler against Blue-Green Flash, I feel like I'm drastically favored to win that matchup. And I think it already goes bigger than traditional green-black cat decks and bigger than Jeskai Fires. So it's really, you're just trying to not get comboed by Jeskai Fires, which you have permission in the sideboard, and then you just have to find a way to stick a Teferi against Blue-Green Flash, which I think is one of the tougher matchups, because in the early stages they can tempo you, put down a threat, and kill you. But this is a deck I'm interested in testing some more, identify which cards aren't necessary to see where I can slot some Teferis in, and if I can make this blue-green ramp splash Teferi, then I feel really good about this deck in the format moving forward. No other changes, just Teferi to really attack those blue-green flash decks. So I think this is one that's worth considering moving forward, and it'll probably be on my list right now. I've been testing Jund Sacrifice, Simic Flash, and Simic Ramp. And that's what those 3 of the main decks I'll be testing tonight's stream. This was run by Menguchi. The other 2 decks I'm looking at possibly considering, but they're kind of outliers. And I might get a couple games in with this last one. But first we have DePraz's Teamer Adventure deck. I streamed this one last week on Monday, and I felt it was amazing. I didn't play it with the Hydroid Crisis. I think that makes it even better. Or the main deck Return to Natures. But I think this deck, personally, I like it better than Green Black Adventure because it just does a lot of things and it just wins off the power of the cards. It doesn't have as silver bullet of a sideboard, or it doesn't have as broken of a sideboard. It has more silver bullets, which I think is safe. But I think this deck is one that's definitely worth considering. And if I'm not feeling great by the end of tonight's stream about any of the other decks, I might give this one a couple more runs, and if it feels right, I'll just jam it and see how it goes. But I think this deck has a lot of legs, and I think it's worth considering for sure. Our last deck, and the one that I'll probably open up tonight's stream with, was run by Kinji, and this is Team Reclamation. And the reason I really like this deck is a lot of the decks in the format have these have these like creature interaction heavy plans, and they're just trying to get through that way. But between Grazer and Growth Spiral, we have a lot of ways of getting mana into play fast. Then we get to generate, unrelenting card play such as Flame Sweep, Mystical Disputes, Brazen Borrowers, and so we can really kind of tempo our opponents out. And then we get to finish up with Expansion Explosion. I really like Brazen Borrower in this list just because if we can get one or two hits with a Brazen Borrower, it is very easy to close a game with an explosion, and there's not a lot of permission floating around outside of Blue Green Flash. Blue Green Flash is the deck that gives me a little more concern with this deck. But because our primary win condition is Explosion, because we are playing on an instant speed axis, we have the same weaknesses to Teferi Time Raveler as Blue Green Flash, but the payoff of this responding to someone tapping out with a win is just so high. So your opponents can't necessarily just run into you because you might just run them back over. Mystical Dispute is really important because I can go, if I ramp on turn 4, I can have 5 lands pretty easily. I can try to stick a Wilderness Reclamation, and if my 4 mana opponent tries to respond with a Frilled Mystic, I get to Mystical Dispute that Frilled Mystic. My Wilderness Reclamation's in play now, and that deck really struggles against a resolved Wilderness Reclamation. Outside of the 2 Brazen Borrowers, they don't have anything they can do. So now at the end of every turn, I just float a bunch of mana. If they tap out for a threat, I explosion them. If they don't tap out for a threat, I play a couple Growth Spirals or Kinster's Insights or Brazen Borrowers, and it should keep on going. So I think this deck is one that's 100% worth considering. It's right in my wheelhouse. It abuses a very specific component of the game. And Kenshi only got 4 wins in Mythic Championship trial, or Mythic Championship 7, so I don't think it's very heavily watched right now. So this deck is very much on my radar as one I want to test and one I want to refine, and very high likelihood that this is a list that I test multiple times over the next couple days. So I know this is a quick breakdown of the Mythic Championship 7. I'm at Grand Prix Oklahoma City this weekend and Grand Prix Portland next weekend, so I'm really trying to narrow down what I'm going to play. I will be on stream again tonight at the normal time. Actually might be on even a little early. I might have a long stream tonight. I might jump on at like 7 and just go till 11 and play like 3 or 4 hours and really try to test this deck out. But yeah, thanks for checking it out. Let me know in the comments below what you would play. I would look forward to kind of narrowing down the deck list.